I'm back for my final segment with Dr. Neil. We were talking about the agenda of these activists. Why do you think that they are willing to stoop to so much distortion, so much propaganda? They want to, they've got Greta Thunberg as their kind of, poster child. And so you have a kind of an autistic kid who is supposed to be the moral symbol, the halo, if you will, of climate change. What do you think is the real agenda here?
Well, let's talk about 2 or 3 reasons why people are pushing global warming. Number one is money. Al Gore would be a classic example of that. Al Gore, as I understand it, invested in 14 green companies, subsidized by the federal government for $1.5 billion. And I don't know what he's worth today, but multi-million.
Let's just say he has a private plane, and exactly.
And so money is an issue. I don't know how many professors are being paid out of global warming money. Now, they have an excellent meteorology department over Texas A&M. I suspect that a lot of those professors are being paid out of global warming money. But that doesn't explain why there is this intensity to push this. And I've come to the conclusion that the environmental, as you have already pointed out in some of your books, that environmental issues are being used to force us into a Marxist socialist society.
In other words, they're a wedge to create more government control and more control over people's lives. I think you made the point when you came over to Debbie and me that the energy sector is critical. And if you control energy, basically you have the country in your hands.
You control the economy. And what a better way to control energy and destroy the economy than to demonize fossil fuels. We are a developed nation because of cheap energy, coal and fuel oil. There's no question about it. That is the secret for other developing countries in the world today. So if you demonize that, because, it creates carbon dioxide, and therefore we've got to change entirely and go to green energy, you destroy the economy.
And the Indians, the Chinese, they know that. They're not even paying one moment of genuine attention to this. They may give lip service. Oh yes, we're taking this very seriously. But the reality is they know they need to use a lot more energy to become fully developed countries. They don't hesitate to do it. And so they're hoping that the West will put manacles or shackles on itself to increase the power of those countries. Wow.
So if you're going to have a Marxist, socialist, whatever name you want to give it, worldwide, then one of the key issues is to destroy the United States. As long as the United States continues to be strong and powerful, then this agenda will never sweep through the world. So you've got to destroy the United States. And the first director of the global warming, first conference on global warming in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, Morris Strong, a multimillionaire out of Canada, said it isn't the only hope for the world is if we destroy the economy of the industrialized nations, that would be the United States. And another key United Nations official said, we've got to get away from the fact that global warming is an environmental issue. It is a way that we are going to redistribute wealth internationally.
I mean, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her chief of staff, Chakraborty, this Indian guy, said that. He basically said it's not a environmental thing, it is a take over the economy thing. I quote that in my book, United States of Socialism. Now, you're part of a group called the CO2 Coalition, a group of, well, I guess you have the skeptics and you have the true believers who are pushing the doctrine. Talk about the skeptics. Who are you, and who's in the group, and also maybe here's a book that you recommended to me. This is by a geologist, Gregory Wrightstone, and it's called Inconvenient Facts.
That's right.
And as I thumb through it, I see just a plethora of charts and graphs and really beautifully presented data. So we'll put this in the resources as one place to look. But who's in the CO2 Coalition?
The Carbon Dioxide Coalition was a group that was established several years ago as skeptics. And there's about 50 of us now that belong to this particular group. All of us have academic credentials. This is just one example of a group of skeptics. There are multitudes of skeptics around, but we don't have any voice because the media will not cover our action.
Even though one of the guys here is the founder of Greenpeace, so
Exactly.
you've got all these
Right.
and people with academic credentials.
Now, Gregory is the president right now of this carbon dioxide coalition. And one of his is, I think that Patrick Moore was the president a year ago, if I remember right.
The Greenpeace guy.
Yeah, he was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace. He's now a skeptic, and he wrote a book called "The Confessions of a Greenpeace Dropout." You know, it's very.
I should get that book. That sounds pretty good. Yeah.
So what I'm telling you is there is a solid group of skeptics across this nation, across the world, but we don't get our message out.
And it's not because, people say, well, there's these climate change deniers,
That's
as if to
right.
say that you're looking at the data and denying the data.
That's
On
right.
the contrary, what
Right.
we've seen in this podcast is we've laid out
That's
the
right.
data.
Right.
We've shown the patterns
That's
in
right.
the data. We've shown how the data is manipulated to serve an ideological end. And I think we've done a pretty good job in exposing these scoundrels. Let's close by me asking you about, I was thinking to myself that, very often people as role models, they think of, I want to be like Robert De Niro, but you realize that those guys have messed up lives.
Absolutely.
You've got an adoring wife. Right. You're almost 90 years old. How many grandchildren do you have?
I have 10 grandchildren and 15 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
16 is on the way.
Oh, wow. Well, what a life you've lived of scholarship, of involvement with the Hurricane Center, helping people to do better with their lives. Let me ask you alluded to this at the very beginning, your faith and how that's been central to you, but you weren't always a believer. How did you sort of come to Christ?
Right.
And what difference has that made in your life?
Well, I was born and raised in a very strong Christian environment in Northwest Kansas. And I inherited a stringent set of moral values, and I tried to live by those all my life. My wife and I went to church, and we were just church members. But we didn't have any personal commitment to this person of Jesus Christ. I didn't understand who this Jesus was. He was a historical figure, but what did he have to do with me in modern America? So the first problem I had was sin. I had the preconceived notion that sin was a specific act, and if you're not involved in the act, you can't be a sinner, and I wasn't involved in the act.
Bad words and bad actions.
But I finally came to the conclusion that sin was my selfish, greedy nature. That's the way I was born. And that separated me from God, and that somehow to get to God and in his kingdom involved this person of Jesus Christ. Now, I emphasize this selfish, greedy nature. 10 grandchildren, 15 great-grandchildren, I didn't have to teach one of them to be selfish and greedy. That's the way they came out of the box.
Fascinating. Well, you also made the striking statement that when you encounter people who are not believers, you say to them, hey, listen, this is obviously an important question. None of us knows what comes after death. How much time have you spent investigating the question of God?
Oh, you can't believe the hours. Initially, I set out to prove that there was no God. I was challenged by an airline pilot who was in our church, and he said, what are you doing in church every Sunday? I said, well, we have small children. It's important they be here. And he said, if there's something here for them, isn't there something for you? And I went home and I got angry. And then I began to reflect on that question. And if you ask a scientist what is truth, you know what he'll tell you? What do the facts show? And it occurred to me that I had spent 21 years of my life in formal classroom training. Not 1 hour was spent finding out whether there was any God. So I thought, okay, I'm going to collect me some facts and prove there's a little God and go to the beach on Sunday morning. Well, God didn't cooperate at all. Okay. And so I literally I made a commitment I'd spend at least 1 hour a day, and that became 2, that became 4, that became 6, and I'm trying to prove no God. But you know what? I was looking for facts, and the thing that really spoke to me was facts. And facts, I mean in terms of testimonies. I probably have 200 books in my library at home of testimonies. Every time I hear somebody give a testimony, I go get the book because that's a fact. I was one way and I accepted Christ and I became different.
Well, let's pause because this is a very important point. You're saying that when you talk about facts, it's not just the historicity of the Gospels or things like you're talking about lives changed.
Absolutely.
And that's data. That's
Absolutely.
individual experiences consolidated into
Right.
a life of faith, and it made a difference. And then let's go to the next guy. Right? And I think you also said strikingly that when you ask others who are not
Right.
believers, how much time have you
That's
spent investigating this question? They give you this vacant look because the truth of it is, see, I don't think they've spent any time, and I don't
No.
think they want to believe.
No.
Right? Isn't that the key?
Well, we're so programmed today. You can go home and there's that tube, and you sit down at that tube after you had your meal, and then you go to sleep in the couch, and then you go back to bed. Then you cycle that thing, and then on the weekend there's some pro football game, or we can watch the Olympics. We're so programmed that we don't have time to sit down and ponder the issues of life.
Well, thank you, Dr. Frank. This has been really just awesome. And it's been a lot of fun, too. So thank you for being here.
Great. Incidentally, I'm one of your biggest fans. I want you to know that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much.